Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined by my no longer for sale co-host Tucker Hazel. We're here to talk about much like how Tucker can no longer be found on the back pages of Craigslist. As of next year, you will no longer find anything on the Wii or 3DS eShops because they are going down. But Tucker, before we get into what is I think a piece of catastrophic Nintendo news, if you want to share your thoughts with us about what you think about this new development, be sure to join our Discord. Link as usual, top of the description, right down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell.
Mm-hmm.
But Tucker, I would like to I'd like to congratulate you on leaving behind a life of prostitution first or after top.
It's been long and hard, but I finally escaped.
Well, in all seriousness, Tucker, I figured we need to add a little bit of sexual levity to the mix here because I think it's going to be a very
What's new for
dour.
backlog banter?
Well, actually, speaking of what's new for Backlog Banter, we're about to have a very dour discussion
Yeah.
about the future of another gaming company because Nintendo announced, and they knew what they were doing here, announced only on Twitter at like 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night that as of March 2023, the Wii U and 3DS eShops are going down 100%.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple caveats before that. First of all, you can no longer add funds to the Wii U or 3DS eShops via your credit card starting May of this year.
Sure.
And you can use those any funds you have on the account or redeem download codes through next year.
Sure. And does that also, do you know if that counts like eShop money, like eShop gift cards?
I think you can probably do that, but what I was alerted to on Twitter, it's actually good we just throw this out at the top of the video because even I didn't know this. You can link your Wii U and 3DS to your Switch, and then you can add money to your Switch, and it will appear in your eShop on Wii U.
Okay, so it's not completely locked out of adding funds. It's a back way. This is actually the same thing that has happened to, I believe, the PS3 and Vita stores. You can buy things on there, but you have to go through like the store and add money specifically to there so you can go on the eShop and buy it. It's so fucking stupid.
Yeah, the point is, Tucker, we're in the home stretch. The Wii U is riding into the sunset. Actually, it's more that its dying corpse is being dragged unceremoniously into the fucking sun before it's chucked there to be eviscerated. But
yeah,
there was one particular thing that Nintendo said that I think really drove the issue home last night. Which they have since unsaid.
Oh, really?
But yes, I'm not sure if you saw this or if the audience saw this, but Nintendo released basically like an FAQ with this piece of news. And one of the questions was to the effect of, now that the storefronts are going down, there's going to be a lot of like legacy titles and download only titles that are no longer going to be available for purchase.
Yeah.
What's kind of the recourse there? Keep in mind, this is a question Nintendo asked itself because it's on its own FAQ page.
Yeah, not that they were crowdsourced questions. They came up with this specific question about, hey, how am I supposed to access the games? Like they worded it like someone asked it to them, but no one did. They asked it to themselves.
Right. And then their answer was basically that Nintendo Switch Online exists. It gives you access to over 130 games, and that they have, quote, no plans to deliver classic content in either mean. Which got people angry, and Nintendo, within hours of posting it, part of the FAQ, since erased it. You can't find that question anymore.
Just that question?
Yes. The rest of the FAQ is still there. But Tucker, that's kind of the lay of the land. There's been, I would say, something of a clusterfuck on Twitter today that I think we ought to unpack. But I really, fuck all of them. What does one Tucker Edward Hazel have to say on the matter?
Well, thank you for referring to me as my full Christian name. My middle name is not Edward. I'd like to clarify. This is interesting to me because as a lover of classic content, as a aficionado of games preservation and being curious about how all these digital stores are existing and then in perpetuity, but then not in perpetuity and going down. We had the exact same conversation last year with the Vita and PS3 stores, which also had a lot of exclusive content, especially the Vita store, games that you couldn't get anywhere else because of the proprietary nature of that system. The Wii eShop went down 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that, and that was a big hurrah, but also it had been a very long time since the Wii released at that point.
Right.
The interesting thing here is not that this doesn't make sense, not that it was inevitable, not that frankly it's going to have a huge impact on these communities because these systems aren't done, new games
Yeah.
aren't releasing. However, the real problem is that Nintendo is outwardly making it clear that they do not care to preserve the content in any way that is now going to be entirely inaccessible. These
Yes.
games, these legacy games, okay, sure, you can play them other ways. You can buy a physical copy and get an NES, or you can emulate the games. Of course, Nintendo doesn't want you doing that, but they've sold themselves short, seemingly on purpose, which is what's really causing an uprising here.
Yeah. So I think the comparison to the Vita store and PSN store is apt. I think the big difference for me is that I actually care this time.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't even own a PS3 or a Vita.
Not anymore, no.
Yeah.
But I think there's a key difference between the Wii and DSi shops closing and this. Not entirely, because I think WiiWare went down, which was a major loss. But the entirety of the Wii Shop channel did not get destroyed because that legacy content was available, not in full because of WiiWare, but in part with the Virtual Console stuff on the Wii U eShop. The DSiWare store closing basically didn't even matter because you can still buy DSiWare on 3DS's eShop right now.
For now. Yeah.
But and that was, I think, same actually the PS3 store kind of expected because those infrastructures were built in a time before anyone really knew what the fuck was going to happen. Like the PSN literally ran in a web browser on PS3 initially. Yeah. And the Wii Shop channel was the Wii Shop channel, right?
Sure.
But I think that I kind of had the assumption, at least now that the Wii U and 3DS shops exist in an integrated way with your Nintendo account, with your Switch, that they were just going to live on in perpetuity. Yeah. Now, I always expected that the multiplayer servers for these consoles would go down, as you would expect them to, because it happens with every system. Yeah. But I didn't think that these shops were going to go down. And I think that this is a huge issue when, as you said, this content is now available nowhere.
Yeah. The real problem comes in because the Wii U is so unique in terms of access to legacy content. This system is, I mean, ostensibly no one has it in comparison to the amount that PS4 has sold, that Switch has sold, that 3DS even has sold, but it still exists as a semi-modern way for you to access a huge amount of other consoles games. They've got everything from NES to N64, smattering, maybe some things missing, but for the most part, entirely covered. I believe they also even have DS games on there.
GBA DS, both of those.
DS.
Wii games.
Sure, yes, because you can buy them digitally and play it through the digitally emulated Wii hardware that's just inside the Wii U. Yes. And there are games from other people's consoles as well. There's Sega games, there are TurboGrafx games, Neo Geo games, stuff like that are obviously not accessible anywhere because frankly, no one really cares about those games anymore. So people don't put the effort into making them available on Xbox and PlayStation and stuff. But the Wii U was so unique that losing this is a huge kneecap to games preservation, even in general. Even if barely anyone had access to this console because it only sold 13 million units in 6 years or whatever, it's still a very strange kneecap that they're just completely taking off the table.
Yeah, this is the point that I think is really frustrating me because there are not many, but there are people saying that Nintendo's in the right to do this. And it comes down to people saying, "Oh, nobody's playing the Wii U anymore. Just emulate them." And I think to that latter point, Nintendo's forced everyone's hand now. If you want to play Kuru, and you have to emulate it. I want to circle back to that point in a second, but I think the people are just missing the forest for the trees here because it doesn't matter that only 13 million people had Wii U's. It mattered that the Wii U was the avenue into this content, and now that avenue is completely shut down. Because I think what we're missing as a larger community is that the people who care about this kind of content are the people who have the Wii U's in the first place.
Sure, or at least a good chunk of them.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden, the price, the barrier to entry for any of these individual games
Mm-hmm.
is astronomical,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think the virtual console is the thing we're all fixating on, but the problem goes much further than that
Mm-hmm.
because where does Pushmo World go? You know,
God, I've always been thinking that, just in general.
you go to 3DS. Where does Pocket Card Jockey go? Where does the first Box Boy go? Where do the Dylan games go? Where does Rusty's Real Deal Baseball go? The answer is they go nowhere. They're
Yeah.
just gone now.
Mm-hmm.
Because from the preservation angle, there's kind of two pieces. There's the access to the older games, which I think is kind of historically speaking more important.
Mm-hmm.
But now the $8 copy of Metroid Zero Mission on Wii U eShop has now become a $60, $70 potential fake cartridge on eBay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the $6.99 copy of Pocket Card Jockey is now just a game completely lost to time.
100%.
And it's those kind of those less sexy eShop exclusives that people don't talk about. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Rusty from Rusty's Real Deal Baseball is incredibly sensual, as we all know.
Well, yeah, no one will deny that.
But now he's completely gone.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
Poor
I
guy,
think this is I think unacceptable
Mhm.
because you can at least make the case that Nintendo either can bring Game Boy Advance games to Switch down the line, or you can just go out and buy a physical copy of Metroid Zero Mission. You
Yeah.
can do nothing about Pocket Card Jockey.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about the balance between these
Yeah.
eShops. What you were saying about the Wii eShop, or what do they call it? The Wii Store, Wii Shop,
Wii Shop channel.
the Wii Shop channel going down was not really a big deal because a lot of that stuff was available on Wii U through the emulated store. They had almost all the
Yeah.
same things, but also even if it had gone down and gone completely, and the Wii U didn't have an alternative, all of the games that were legacy content that aren't Wii Shop exclusive, which how many Wii Shop exclusive like eShop only titles were there?
There was actually a lot of WiiWare in terms of notable games, less, but you lost things like some Dr. Mario games, you lost Water Warfare, which was a favorite of mine, you lost Pokemon Rumble, you lost the Final Fantasy My Life as a King or Dark Lord games.
Sure.
And even the weird horse shit, it's still important that it exists somewhere. And now that was just into the wind.
And so I'm just thinking, as someone who wants to play any game, frankly,
Yes.
I have such a wide interest in games, and I like looking at small threads that no one really cares about anymore, and especially the 3DS digital only titles I'm fascinated by. I have not bought them, and I was thinking about buying them, but then okay, actually there's quite a lot, and they're not expensive, but not super cheap.
They add up.
So yeah, exactly. So if I was to lock myself down and say, hey, I need access to these games if I want to play them in the future, it's like $150 just dropped. And maybe not all those games are good. Maybe I don't enjoy them, but that's the only way I can access them anymore. I personally don't have any experience with emulating DS/3DS games. I don't know how well the emulators work. I'm sure there are the alternatives. As someone who is very easily not opposed to utilizing emulation, I'm not going to be as affected by this, except for when it comes to those eShop only 3DS titles in specific, because that hardware and the touchscreen and the 3D effect and stuff is integral to those games in a way that many games that you can emulate don't have gimmicks that require specific hardware.
Right. Yeah. And there are very compelling Wii U and 3DS emulators.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Breath of the Wild.
Yes, those systems have been out for a long time. Just because I have never downloaded a 3DS emulator doesn't mean that a great one doesn't exist.
Yeah, they do. See, here's where it gets complicated, because I think you wrote you've erosioned two important points from the ground.
Sure.
The first one, let's get to the emulation. I want to keep kicking this emulation can down the road for a minute.
Okay, that's fine.
You said something about how you are interested in these games, but you haven't had the opportunity to buy all of them yet.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of the show, John Cartwright. He puts out a tweet about this, and I responded, and I was like, I've owned a 3DS since 2011. I've had my Wii since 2014.
Yeah.
And there are still hundreds of dollars worth of games between these storefronts that I still have yet to play.
Yeah.
And one of the responses I got was like, you had 10 years to buy these games on 3DS and you didn't. So what are you complaining about?
Yeah.
I just think that this is such a terrible argument. I can't even believe people are making it, frankly. I think it's just completely fucking backwards. Because ultimately, the goal of these storefronts is to create a perpetual ecosystem in which you can always play these games in a legal and official format.
The idealized goal of those storefronts
Right.
is that. The goal of these storefronts was, frankly, never that. These storefronts were never going to exist in perpetuity. And I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that in a nihilistic way. Nintendo never planned to keep these storefronts
Right.
inevitably or until perpetuity, whatever I'm trying to say. But it's interesting that, frankly, I didn't think that they were going to go down for 5 years or something, which doesn't change that much.
Yeah.
But it changes that I have 5 more years to access these games if I want to.
I think the situation is this, though. At the time, Nintendo obviously was not savvy enough to figure this shit out, right?
Yeah.
But they are both in a position where they are so financially strong that they can either incur the server costs to keep these things up because that's kind of their responsibility, is my opinion, as a platform holder.
Mm.
Or there was their responsibility to figure out a way to integrate the stores better or to migrate the content over in an equitable way. Because, I think you have a little bit more wiggle room with that eShop channel. I get that was a completely different time. But in a year of our Lord 2022, in an environment where content is distributed digitally,
primarily digitally.
You can't pull the plug on that completely and just expect that we're going to say, oh, you got to pay for server costs. There weren't enough people using it, whatever. Because my bottom line on the entire matter is this: Nintendo has set up a binary now where either you don't play the game or you emulate it.
Yeah.
Because before it was you buy a Wii U, you don't play the game or you emulate it.
Mm-hmm.
And for $300, while you should not have had to buy that Wii U to play these games, you still were given a very accessible ecosystem to play these games in their highest resolutions possible, with modern affordances, better controls, and everything in a lot of cases. Or you could emulate it if you were that type of individual, but Nintendo always gave you that official option. Mm-hmm. And now that option is just completely missing. Yeah. So now what are you supposed to do as the consumer? You have no way to actually support Nintendo now.
Absolutely. I mean, so there's a meme out there, and I think maybe you sent it to me or I sent it to you or something. It's the Patrick in the cave and what's the Mermaid Man and Rubber Guy.
Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, but that's neither of the characters.
Oh, Rubber Suit Man. What the fuck?
Yeah, people know who you're talking about. That's not my wallet.
Was showing the wallet thing. Yeah. And the idea that fans, people who want to play these games, are willing to pay Nintendo to buy these games. And frankly, the demand for these games is higher now than they have been for the last 5 years. And Nintendo is just saying, makes sense. You're a customer. We want your money, but too bad. You don't get these games for undisclosed reasons, presuming that they just don't care that much anymore. They don't see the cost benefit outweighing, or the benefits outweighing the costs. It's very peculiar, but the fact that there isn't that strong, okay, this is exactly why, and it's kind of ambiguous, is what's most frustrating, especially because Nintendo, last night, now not anymore, was so hard set. And we have an option, but I know it's not good enough, but too bad, I guess.
Yeah, it really read like a company that does not give a fuck about its back catalog. And I think this is becoming increasingly transparent from Nintendo in the age of, here's Mario 35, there goes Mario 35, here's the All-Stars Collection, there goes the All-Stars Collection, here's Fire Emblem, the frying pan of justice and the macaroon of truth.
Yeah.
And now they're gone again, right? Mm-hmm. And now they're telegraphing like, yeah, we recognize internally that we're deleting this content, and we're so brazen about that. We're just going to tell you that we don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that a platform holder with this deep of back catalog has anything other than the responsibility to its audience to make that catalog available.
Yeah.
Even if it's through these circuitous means of last generation systems, it was at least there. And the issue was, why wasn't it on Switch? Not why aren't these games literally anywhere?
Yeah.
And I just think that it's indefensible on Nintendo's behalf to just pull the plug on this with no solution or even the promise of a solution. They didn't even say, hey, we're looking into ways to bring this content over. They said, we have no plans to bring the content over, period.
Yeah. That the pulling of that comment could both be a very bad thing and both be a very good thing. I mean, it's possible that them pulling that down, realizing that it backfired, that is, maybe it's the wording, maybe it's the fact that they said that at all instead of saying nothing, clearly backfired on them. And there is the possibility that they will put up a similar thing that maybe rewords it into a more hopeful light of more things coming to Switch, of the additional promise of something in the future that sort of makes up for it. But I really don't know how to feel about the fact that they pulled it. Has there been any information about that, or is it just a thing that's been gone?
There's been no information, and I don't trust Nintendo to give us any
Yeah.
because none of their behavior has telegraphed that they really care at all.
Yeah.
It was baffling that they put that statement up in the first place, but
Don't disagree. Yeah.
I don't think that Nintendo is at a place where they say, yeah, we thought on it, we see the error in our ways, we're going to change that.
Yeah.
People are saying it online, but I do not think that Nintendo is going to come out and say, actually, guys, we're changing our minds, we're not pulling the plug, similar to what Sony did.
Mm-hmm.
I think Nintendo has said what they're going to do, they're going to do it, and it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a year. Yeah. Anything could happen in a year, but ultimately, I think even in the best case scenario, we get Game Boy Advance games on Switch.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah,
maybe Game Boy comes over because Game Boy Color are one of the big pillars of that 3DS eShop. There's Game Gear and shit too, but in terms of Nintendo stuff, that needs to come over somewhere. But it's just ridiculous because at the bare minimum, we are going to lose these 3DS games. The ones that are never even on cartridge, you don't have an option to get a physical cartridge of these games. Even if you were willing to pay the money, pay the cost, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that emulation then is the answer, because I agree with you. There are games that emulate better than others.
Yeah.
And games that are predicated on the affordances of a 3DS do not emulate the ways that Game Boy Advance games do. Yeah, and there are workarounds, there are solutions. You can probably rip the ROM and you can probably inject it into your 3DS.
True. Yeah.
But the fact that Nintendo is making you do this in the first place is just it's tone deaf this year in particular. It's not 10 years ago when we didn't know what was happening. Yeah. It's 2022, and we need to be holding these platforms to a higher standard if we're going to move in a digital direction for the entire industry.
Yeah, and that's what happened to Sony last year, which was a great sign that they were willing to listen. I mean, that last year's success of them turning around on saying, "Hey guys, sorry, like we didn't realize how big of a deal this would be, and we apologize, and here, we're bringing it back." Maybe it might have been changed format a little bit, but I don't really know specifically. That is a categorical win. And unfortunately, Nintendo is in a place where the Switch is so successful. They haven't been putting effort into keeping up their back catalog, to a certain degree for so long that they're just going to tank the cost of this. They're going to take the hit. They're going to tank the optical hit of it. And it is incredibly nihilistic for me to say, but there's nothing we can do except for learn about the emulation / put some money down and buy the games now. And that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's doubly frustrating because not only is stuff going to get lost, but it's just going to fuck up the secondhand market so much worse.
Christ, yeah.
Because the thing that I think people forget is that I think part of the reason that GameCube games go for such unchecked values is because there is no other alternative.
Yeah.
If you want to play Path of Radiance, you buy Path of Radiance at $300 or whatever the market value for it is now, which is probably higher than that. But now all of a sudden Nintendo is going to do that to Wii. They're going to do that to N64 in its entirety. They're going to do it to GBA. They're going to do it to Wii U. The Wii U is, I think, going to be the worst offender because there are so few Wii U's out there that games like Xenoblade Chronicles X, which already go for a lot of money, are going to go for a fucking arm and a leg because there are less Wii U's than GameCube. And look what happened to the GameCube market. Nintendo, they poured over a lot of those games, but they didn't port over several more that need that gamepad. And now just watch Nintendo Land go for $80, $100 online in a couple months because it's going to happen.
100%. And I can't welcome that, but as someone who is interested enough in this to care about it to a certain extent, I mean, you and I'll probably sit down in the next couple of days and think, okay, which games do we need to pick up? Like, which ones are leaving? Which ones can we risk losing completely. I don't know. It's a thought process that I'll have to put myself through, which I future projected, thinking that that's inevitably going to happen. I need to buy these games eventually, but feels weird that it's happening now. But it would feel this weird if it was happening at any point, and it was going to happen at some point.
Yeah, it was going to happen at some point. I mean, we're 10 years after the Wii U's launch.
Yeah.
Well, almost. It'll be 10 years
Nearly.
this November. It's over 10 years for 3DS now. So like, I do think that's a little bit quick, but honestly, there is no functional difference between an ending. Frankly, there's no functional difference in an ending in 10 years or 50 years if the content never leaves the platforms.
Yeah.
And the content's not going to.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that you can emulate these games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to. And that's a personal decision. People can emulate them. I don't really give a shit what other people do. I know that I'm not going to do that. But the fact of the matter is now I have lost access.
Yeah.
And
Good.
you do. First of all, yes, I don't deserve access to Mario Strikers Charged. You're correct about that. Or God forbid I was able to play Pushmo World.
No.
But here's the thing. You have no salient position to come to me as just some random person on Twitter and say, yeah, actually, you know what? It doesn't really matter that Nintendo's doing this because you can just pirate the games. Mm-hmm. You can advise that, but that is not a solution to the problem. It is a band-aid, but it is not, in an industry that's becoming digital, it is not a good enough solution to me to say you can just steal the games instead of pushing Nintendo to have an accurate solution. Because I have said, and I will continue to say, that emulation is the only way to preserve the industry in its entirety.
Yeah,
that is 100% true. 100%. But that does not mean it is a consumer side substitute for access to these games.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I both agree and disagree with you. I think that the fact that emulation is more prevalent than ever, is more accessible than ever, is higher quality than ever, does mean that it is frankly the better option for anyone. You have to have -1 moral scruple stat to do it, but the fact that you are able to freely and easily get access to anything and not requiring the hardware makes it pretty much factually the better solution for everyone on the planet, because you don't have to have the specific hardware, you don't have to go out and find it, you don't have to deal with the eShop, whatever. It is, to me, emulation is the only solution. We cannot rely on these companies. Clearly, we cannot rely on these companies. And if they do not have the games available for you to buy, because they will not, and they do not, that's the only way to play them. And I personally don't see that as a bad thing, because it's the only thing that's hurting is those companies. They're not getting your money because they didn't give you an access to it. Okay, fine. Screw you, billion-dollar company. You made a weird decision. I can still play those games.
See, here's the thing about it. You're right. And I agree with the sentiment completely that we cannot rely on Nintendo to do this for us. Mm-hmm. And I can at least go to bed at night as somebody who cares about the industry as a higher artistic medium. Yeah. Go to bed at night knowing, these games exist out there. Mm-hmm. You don't have to try to find a legitimate copy of Metroid Zero Mission. Yeah. You can do a Google search and be playing it in literally 2 minutes later. And that is good. Is it legal? No, but is it good for the ability of the industry to live on? Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't think that is right. That Nintendo is just going to put that onus completely on us.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think it's not. I think it's not right. Yeah. On Nintendo's side, though.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think where piracy and emulation is a little bit muddy, and this is a conversation that Colin Moriarty brought up on Sacred Symbols, is that just because a company isn't selling a game to you now, mm-hmm. doesn't mean they don't have plans to sell it to you in the future.
Very true.
And this is where things get tricky for me, because a really weird example is Live Alive, which Square Enix is now bringing back.
Sure.
I know undisclosed people who have emulated that game, because why the fuck would Square Enix ever bring back Live Alive?
True, yeah.
But they did, and they had a plan for it. It doesn't mean it was a good plan. It doesn't mean this undisclosed person should have had to wait that long. But it means that there is this element to emulation that is not as morally sort of free of responsibility as some people say it is.
Yeah.
Like Donkey Kong 64, when that leaves, is going to be inaccessible. Nobody is going to make official firsthand money off of that.
Yep.
You're not paying the secondhand
Well,
retailer,
no,
but that's
hold on. Let's clarify. No one's making official first-hand money off of it now because no one's buying Donkey Kong 64.
right. But the point is, if you wanted to buy it, the money would go to Nintendo. Now, yeah, you can emulate it, sure. But what about when Nintendo in 3 months down the line says, and now it's time for Donkey Kong 64?
Yeah.
The problem is now you're in this weird moral quandary where if you don't care, you don't care. That's fine.
Yeah.
But like where Nintendo is ostensibly still holding this content for ransom.
Yeah.
Now you don't have the official avenue. You just have the threat of the official avenue. So
sure.
So like Nintendo, I don't like the idea that now we're again at Nintendo's beck and call for them to just say, and finally here's GBA.
Of course.
Because that's not right either.
No, exactly.
They needed to say, here goes the shop, here is the replacement.
Yeah.
Because now they just open up the doors into all these unnecessary problems on the consumer side. Because Gabe Newell has, I think, the best quote on emulation and piracy in the industry, which is, people will not pirate if you give them an easy and legal alternative to it. Yep. And that easy legal alternative was Steam.
Yep.
And PC piracy exists, but no one gives a shit because Steam is there.
Yeah.
GOG is there. All of these storefronts are there, right?
And they presumably are never going down.
No, they're not.
Well,
and they
they might in like 300 years, but
well, sure, but if we're all dead, who really gives a fuck?
That's a great point.
But now it's like Nintendo's not doing that. They're giving us they're not even giving us a difficult and official alternative. They're giving us no alternative.
Mm-hmm. This is the kind of WND that really makes my nuts boil.
Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. I just really, I think it's indefensible. I think it's an indefensible thing. I think people who are trying to defend it or trying to contextualize it are out of their fucking minds. Nintendo can afford to keep these storefronts open, or they can afford the R&D to get these games on Switch, because when they do, they're going to make money hand over fucking fist.
Yeah.
So Nintendo is not the victim here in any way.
No, of course not. No, Jesus, of course not.
Nintendo is not making a good business decision. Nintendo is not doing anything other than taking the easy way out because they think they can do the Disney Vault thing of, goodbye, here comes Metroid Zero Mission, you better buy it for the 6 months available. Goodbye, Metroid Zero Mission, cycle in the new game. It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous.
All right, let's just sit around and wait until more rumors of GBA on Switch. That's all we can do.
And in the meantime, we'll just take slaps in the face to preservation, to Nintendo's back catalog, to consumer choice, to the stability of your past purchases when your Wii U gamepad inevitably breaks and you can't access your games anymore. Yeah. When your 3DS's hard drive goes, when all this shit happens, goodbye to everything there.
Yeah.
This is Nintendo's fault, and it was 100% avoidable.
Christ.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Band. No, you fucked me up. Don't finger wag my direction again. After the incident, you should know better.